The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. So, as a foreigner here in Japan, the one thing that will always characterize your life is this idea that you are the outsider. No matter how long you're here, you'll never shake this feeling. And in fact, maybe the longer you stay, the more deeper ingrained this will become. And so Sean in Tokyo Drift, he's a bit similar to me. He's white, he's taken out of like a regular or just like humble background and placed like seemingly at random in Japan. Now, I was never one of these people who are like obsessed with Japan. I didn't study Japanese at university and I was never into anime, at least before coming here. In fact, the things that got me into Japan were pretty irregular. I loved the Battle Royale movie and I loved Pride FC and used to watch it all the time. And I especially loved Shenmue. And Shenmue I credit as being the biggest influence on my decision to move to Japan and live here. And similarly, like Sean is not an expert on Japan either. He's just been like plucked out of his life and dropped into Japan in the middle of a school year, which I can also relate to. And this word, gaijin, is often or always like translated as foreigner, but it doesn't, if you're being literal, it doesn't really mean that at all. So gai, jin, outside person. And if there's outside people, there's also, inside people. And that's what characterizes life here. Whether it's your colleagues and customers, inside, outside, your friends, and strangers, inside, outside, and, like a million other different ways that this inside-outside dynamic can work. And so it's not just you as a foreigner that is an outsider, And this is all like so pervasive that even the way a person speaks to another is influenced by this uchi and outsider soto. And in England we can have like our inner circles, our friends, family, lovers or colleagues, and these are inner circles, but there's a degree of like flexibility there, and you can accept new people into this inner circle and be flexible. But like flexibility, for anyone who's like lived here, you'll know that flexibility just does not exist in Japan. And so in Japan, people who's like inner circles, they rarely change and they rarely have new members in them. Almost from when you graduate high school, besides like work, which you will probably work in the same job for much of your life. You're not really going to get any new inner circles and rarely going to get new people come into your existing circles. And so in every way, this inner outer relationship will almost dominate your life. Work inner circle selected by management. Your school, high school inner circle that's almost selected by random by the school administration system. And then your sports club or circle that's just chosen by people who have similar interests to you. Maybe you even knew them from competing in high school or college sports and stuff. And you never really change or have control over who is in your uchi. So Sean goes into his first day of high school, and it just reminded me like so much of the first time I went into a high school in Japan, as he's sort of paraded in front of his class to do like a little introduction and stuff, and there's this interaction with like his form room teacher where she introduces him to uwabaki, or as he says it really cool, he says like uwabaki. He has like a really good accent. So she doesn't speak English, he doesn't speak any Japanese, and they have this conversation where they just repeat the word to each other until the person who needs to do something understands. And this is so relatable, like to me when I got here. Like I'm okay now. I can speak like okay Japanese. But like when I first got here, like it was like a shock to my system, and I had to do so many of these like miming word repetition things to like get something in my skull. And yeah, just that entire first experience he has in his school is like so relatable to I guess like any foreigner. But I can absolutely like relate to this this introduction to life here, and being paraded around a high school as like the new foreign face. You get this feeling of being like a celebrity. You walk past classrooms on your way to do the 6 millionth piece of admin, and the kids point at you, start gossiping about you and waving at you, smiling at you, and it's nice. Like it's a nice feeling, but it doesn't stop. And you're always the outsider. It doesn't stop, and you always feel like you get to feel like what celebrities must feel like when they have like paparazzi always watching them, waiting for them to slip up, or waiting for them to just react or something, and you start to feel like incredibly self-conscious. You think that being treated like a celebrity would give you like an ego or make you feel gassed in yourself, but it doesn't. It has like the exact, or at least for me, it has the exact opposite effect. It made me like so self-conscious and so awkward, just uncomfortable, feeling like I was being like looked at like through a microscope my entire life. Yeah. And Sean, by default, he's accepted into this like gaijin uchi, full of like other foreigners in the same situation as him. The girl Neela, who's, even though she was born in Japan, she's like a hafu, so she's an outsider. And then we have Lil Bow Wow's character, Twinkie. Twink. This boy looks zesty. He looks moist. Got Mizuami in his teacup. He lied on his getter. He a little bit fruity. Plays with the Ronin. Does Japanese dance in the courtyard. This boy loves to watch Kabuki. Man, this boy belonged to the tea club. Going to coordinate your belt with your katana, and that shit's going to impress the great feudal warlord Oda Nobunaga. This boy lived fundoshi. He on the down low. This boy an origami trader. He do ikebana. He liked to pound the chocolate mochi. He a friend of the Lady Kasuga. He feel the love, dare not speak its name. He love Odori. He of the Himiko sisterhood. He indulges in the Joseon vice. He has a antipathic sexual instinct. He's fluent in Japanese Polari. His favorite literature is The Tale of Genji. He ride the backward jinrikisha. He carries a sword for the secret emperor. He's temperamental. He's one of them, if you catch my drift. You know, when I was getting ready to come to Japan, I remember talking to my family saying, "Oh, I'm going to learn Japanese really good, and I'm going to make friends with so many Japanese people, and I'm not just going to be one of those foreigners hangs around with other foreigners and doesn't know any Japanese people." And it's like, it's so naive, and I think most foreigners are like this. They genuinely, when they come here, they have like an interest in Japan, and like they want to like be friends with Japanese people. It doesn't work out that way, and so you see things form like the Gaijin Uchi, and there'll be a volleyball league, and there's a Gaijin team, and there'll be Gaijin pub crawls or Gaijin language exchanges where you all get together in your Uchi and hang out together. And sure, there are sometimes Japanese people involved in these, and it's kind of like this like Bullet Club type experience. You have all these Gaijin outsiders, and then like there's a few like Japanese people who are like on the fringes. Maybe they're like Yankee, or maybe they've lived abroad and see that different side of like of life, and they want to be like part of this like outsiders insider. Suffice to say, I think all of this makes a pretty strong, convincing argument against immigration, or at least against mass immigration. We all people have our own ethnic in-group that we understand. Life isn't a mystery or uncomfortable, because we know that generally they will think like we do, and they will act in a way that's predictable, and so life becomes a little bit easier and less stressful. And again, this is not something that I begrudge Japan from having. I wish that we British still had it. I think the only way that as a foreigner you will really make it into a Japanese Uchi, I said Uchi, is by like getting in a relationship with a Japanese person. Maybe one of these people is interested in the outside world. They do exist, or one of these people that is a little bit of an outsider themselves, and getting into a romantic relationship with a Japanese person, you will pretty convincingly make your way into like one Uchi. Again, I said Uchi. And you'll get to know their family, and hopefully their family will accept you. And I think this happens, or seems to happen, far more often with foreign male Japanese female for a multitude of reasons. And you very rarely see couples that make up Japanese male and foreign female. And again, there's probably a multitude of reasons for this, but I think that again, the foreign females that come here probably have expectations or ideal situations where they'll make lots of friends, and I'm sure they do, and have a fulfilling relationship. But it doesn't always seem to work out like that, and a lot of the time the foreign females that are here, they seem very depressed, and I think it's because they probably feel invisible for the first time in their life, and they're not getting the attention that they were maybe used to in their own country, where this inter-ethnic competition for mates has it's been forcefully thrown upon the West. And yeah, I think that a lot of them end up pretty depressed, or more depressed, and rarely you see a relationship of that pairing. Back in the day, whenever I matched with a woman, either foreign or Japanese, on a dating app, and they had like this in the bio, it would say like no one night stands, or the famous like yarimoku dame. And I would always ask them, like, who is it that's always requesting this type of interaction with you? And they would never ever give me a straight answer, because they knew the point that I was getting at. They knew that me being white, I'm getting at a point to them, and their refusal to answer or say, oh, it's everybody, it can be anyone, that gives me my answer in itself, right? And I think like Tokyo Drift is at its best when it's showing you just this like almost a mundane side of life as a foreigner in Japan. When Sean's at school, or he's just going about like basic chores or whatever like that. I find that far more interesting, as I do in most films. And it's when the film like goes to its like big conclusion, or these big like action-packed races, that it starts to lose me, as it like becomes less personal and just less interesting. Yeah, and then it gets more ridiculous as well, especially once you've like experienced life here. Sean is almost like accepted by this 40-50-year-old Yakuza boss, who agrees to his proposal for a mountain showdown, and then watches it on a like 2006 mobile phone. And it becomes progressively like more ridiculous. And by the end of the film, Sean goes back to the garage where he went at first, and he's the new Drift King, and he's accepted by all the Japanese people. They hoist him on their shoulders. Ogaijin-san, Ogaijin-san. It's absolutely ridiculous. In real life, like, nothing would have changed. People like, he walks past and they'd be like, refusing to like make eye contact with him. Differently to maybe Americans or Canadians or even Australians that live here, or just in general, we English, we sort of have this like a little bit of a reputation as being hard nuts to crack, but being like quite like good friends once you do get past that awkward exterior. And I think that in the UK we're quite like aware of our awkwardness, and so we create like a lot of situations which you can avoid that awkwardness and interact with strangers. If you're in a pub, it's generally seen as a more appropriate place to just randomly talk to random people. And if you're at some sort of event, the races, or a concert, a gig, and that these people have like a similar interest to you or similar goal, and you can talk about it, and you can how about that, yeah. And so we have ways to push past the awkwardness of talking to people we don't know in the UK, and maybe that's the same in Japan, especially with the drinking or bar scene. But I think generally there's maybe less opportunities. Pretty obviously, there's less opportunities for Japanese people to socialize or have hobbies or have fun, and as they have like a far more of a we'll say, commitment to work or not socializing. There's always been this talk by the usual suspects. People like who go on Reddit who say that like, oh, Han should have been the main character of this film, calling you out Asian masculinity. Yeah, but the film wouldn't work. Even within its like own universe, the film wouldn't work, because when the film starts, we see that Han is already embedded almost fully within Japanese society. He's a high-ranking member of this Japanese yakuza, despite not being ethnically Japanese. And he's rich. He speaks what we see as like fluent Japanese, and he lives like a completely normal Japanese life, because it's probably not gonna. I'm sure there's loads of like Korean and Chinese people now being like, yeah, that's not true. It's not realistic. But for the purposes of this film, like racially, he would fit in more in Japan than someone who's more obviously foreign, like Sean or myself. So the film just wouldn't work as is with Han as the main character, the Sean character. But at the same time, they had like gold on their hands with this film, and they should have known that, really. Like, can you imagine like a film series that like almost reboots the universe, where Han plays the like Vin Diesel character who's more embedded in the underworld, and Sean's like the Paul Walker who's like a bit more green and has to be introduced to these things. And Han being East Asian would make it so you could set all these films in East Asia and have like the same dynamic. It would have been so good. It would have been so interesting. But they kill him off and then have to like retcon the series to go back in time to when he was alive to include him in the films. Like, didn't they think about this before they killed his character? So yet again, we have another film that is set in Japan, and at least tangentially related to Japan, and there's no or very few Japanese people in the film, though a lot more than Bullet Train. And yeah, it's not very Japanese, although again more than some other films, and many shots and stuff weren't filmed in Japan. And this possibly is going to be like a running theme in this series of, we're going to make a film about Japan, but it's not really about Japan. All of this, like, it might seem that I have like a chip on my shoulder about Japan, or like I don't like it here, but that's it's not the case at all. There were so many benefits to living here. It's clean, safe, homogeneous. People have like this like civil duty, or this sense of civil duty and like respect for society. Most people, and it's so different to what England has become. And like Japan might be at times like I think even for Japanese people, at times Japan is a very lonely place, and for me too. Japan has been incredibly lonely at times, and I'm someone who would like self-identify as being like a lone wolf type, and even I've been lonely here sometimes. And so all this is to say that I don't begrudge the Japanese for having their homeland and having their inner circle and inner group of like Japanese people. I don't begrudge them that. I appreciate it, but at the same time, it makes me a little bit, I guess, envious that we in England, or more accurately, like maybe we in Britain, we've lost ours, or it's been taken from us. And yeah, that is probably like the most difficult thing to accept for me. And so, you know, in a way, this uchi, despite being at times a negative thing and stuff, even for Japanese people, it has helped them preserve their own place in the world where they can be at home. And that's what I really, really, really regret, that in Britain, England, we don't have that anymore. And we don't risk becoming an island of strangers. That ship has already sailed. You know, we are an island of strangers.